So, Aryan, welcome to the show. I've seen you all over the news. I would love to know what you're building. Agents seem like a very, very exciting problem. You've raised money from Sam. You've raised money from Nat and Daniel. Would love to know your story.
Yeah, we are building this, it's called Induced. We build these AI bots that we run on the cloud, and just think of these as like extended members of your team. Every bot has full access to a browser. It has its own email. It has its own phone number, and everything's running on the cloud, so that it doesn't affect your computer. You can be sleeping, and the bots can still um, work and function. We use these bots, and we kind of basically deploy them in business processes and workflows where a company doesn't want, as a 50-member team, they're spending time doing a lot of stuff that is not really requiring cognitive power. Could be form filling, data entry, could be just scouting leads, running verification, anything, any business process that would typically be outsourced either to a back office, either they run their own back office. That's kind of the stuff that we use these bots to run on the cloud. And it's like a real back office. So you can, because we deploy these browser instances and run them, you can have 1,000 running at once. You can have five, depending on what you need. So yeah, that's basically what we're building. It's a slightly different kind of agent. It's not fully autonomous. It's like doing consumer work. We have a lot more scripting and just input that goes into it. But we also kind of do that because we are serving a customer segment that wants reliability, and that's kind of it feels for us, it's one of the most exciting opportunities. When we can go into the architecture later, but the way we've come to this and how we've designed this, we think the infrastructure we're creating in this process is just going to be increasingly important as more people start creating agents, models, and connect them to the internet. How we came to this, so we've both me and my co-founder Ayush, we're both fairly young, and we started working in tech. Um, when we were 13, 14, started writing code. We used to look at all these people that you mentioned we raised money from. They're kind of the people that we used to look up on YouTube, and we used to see the YC startup school lectures, and it's like this is what's cool, and at some point in life we want to be able to do this. And we did different versions of that before this. So this was not the first thing that we've worked on, even together. So we built a bunch of stuff in AI before. I was working at this company where we were doing physiotherapy AI. Ayush was working at this company called Third Web that was build crypto dev tools. And last year, early this year, we were sort of at this point where both of us were done with school. We didn't want to go to college. Ayush was just frustrated. I actually had a scholarship to come to the US. It was like from a foundation that Eric Schmidt runs. And it was like basically not interested in going. We were way too excited about what was happening with AI generally in tech, and it sort of felt like we should do something together. So that's how it started. It was very organic. We didn't plan that we want to build a company around it. Earlier, it was just going to a bunch of hackathons, building some independent projects, and from that, we just caught onto a bunch of patterns that seemed to lead to something, and that's what this form factor of the product has come to now.
How did you get in touch with Sam?
So with all of these people that we used to read stuff about, I we used to cold outreach, and this is just I have embarrassing emails from when I was 14 that I've sent out to people, which is, I'm a big fan. I watch your videos every day, and I would love to work for you. What is your advice to me? And I actually have some interesting replies. I have one reply from Michael Siepel at YC, and he's like, don't send emails to people is my advice. Go read up stuff online and start building things. So we used to kind of send these things out. There was stuff that we've sent to Sam before. Obviously, we've been in touch, and we've seen him before he kind of became this global icon pre ChatGPT. So there was like a little bit of that interaction, and then we used to come to SF on trips before we like started spending time here for work, and that was like while we were working, we had a little bit of money, so we buy a ticket, come to SF, stay with some friends, meet interesting people, go to these events. So we met him like once or twice there, saw him there. And then there was one, like, it's like out of all of the cold outreach attempts and then some mutuals that were formed over time, it was like a 3 year period of time we got in touch. He said and I kind of pitched him that I want to work with you. So I'll be a secretary. I'll do whatever you want. I just want to be around you and see how stuff is happening at OpenAI, because they've been releasing interesting papers way before language models came out, and the whole team. So I did that, and he was like, I'm way too busy spending time on OpenAI and Helion, which is his other fusion company. But we should keep in touch. So then we kept in touch. When we were doing the round, we went to him, like, this is what we are working on, and would be awesome to have you. And that's basically how that happened. I remember the one funny story in that process is when I met him last year, of one of these interactions. I was like, I'm interested in a lot of things. There is this whole like concept of how we can use AI to just make software, and I'm interested in some things around like bio, and like space is really exciting. I think there's like breakthroughs happening everywhere. And he was like, oh, this is all useful. But I think the most interesting thing, or like the most high leverage thing you can work on is AI, and you will come back to this at some point. And that was like summer of last year. So it eventually happened. So I went to him, I was like, you said we'll come to AI. It has sort of happened. And it would be awesome to have you with us. Yeah.
Interesting. You also raised from Nat and Daniel. I've heard that Nat and Daniel give you like, apart from their money, it's also like you get a cluster that you have on-demand access to. Is that true?
They have a cluster. It is, I think the direct access is available to the companies that they just allocate large amounts of capital to, and they're weights and biases, and they've done like 11 labs and a bunch of other deals. We got to them through AI grant, which is the accelerator that they run. It's basically it's the safest form of investment. So it's not a grant, but it's kind of the lowest bar of investment that you can have. It's structured as a uncapped safe. So we applied for that. It's kind of like the YC for AI. They take 25 companies every batch. The last batch was Perplexity, Replicate, Lexica, a bunch of other companies. And we applied for this batch, and we got into the batch, and that's why we came to us. We were presenting at the demo day for that. And that's how they invested. They have the cluster. What we've seen is we don't have too much context because we've not asked for access yet. But it's split up and it's available for use to their companies. And I think the idea behind that was, it's just GPUs are more precious than money right now, especially for AI companies. And you want to be able to, as an investor, it just makes you even more attractive. I think they're still probably the most influential pair of investors among that group in AI. Like they set the narratives, but the GPU is just like a plus one, or probably plus 10, because you want to, like you can, it takes away one like concern that founders have. So I think we can ask for access, and they can give us like chunked access, and we can use it for some stuff. They also do it for researchers. So the AI grant accelerator, and there's the AI grant, which is like I think 5 to 50K for researchers, and they also get access to that. But yeah, they're really fun investors. Nat actually built the first, in users are talking about agents. He built one of the first agents that's on GitHub. It's called NatBot. This is GPT-3 2020 or 21. And that was kind of, that repository blew up, and that paved the path for all of these. Like people were like, oh, I have a breakthrough. We can build an AI agent that does things in the browser. And it's like, it all goes back to that repository and like a bunch of things that happened before that. So I think, yeah, they're really cool.
And tell me something. Like, tell me how the tech works. I mean, we covered Hyperwrite recently.
Yeah.
Right. And I think what you're building is pretty similar to Hyperwrite in a way. Are you guys sitting on top of GPT? Are you sitting on top of GPT Vision?
We use, on the model side, we do a bunch of stuff with GPT, and then we have some custom models that we build using open source and fine tune them.
That's Lava 1.5.
Lava 1.5, the other Quen model, and there's like a few fine tuned like specific smaller language models that you can also use. How it's sort of different is, we looked at a lot of these agents when we even started designing this, and it was like, a lot of people are designing it for consumers, which is like end users. Even if someone's designing it for businesses, it's for the end user in a business. So it's you sitting on your computer. It sits on your computer as an extension or as an aid, and it's kind of like a co-pilot.
You want a headless browser that runs the flow by itself.
That's basically what we've done. And we've done something interesting there, where instead of running a direct Chromium fork running headlessly, we've customized some parts of the Chromium, like just how it's architected. So the rendering engine, and how we look at mutations, and how we interact with the CDP protocol and COM. And what that allows us to do is, one, run the whole thing remotely. So it's not meant for synchronous use. So if you want to book a flight ticket, or if you want to send emails, that's kind of not what it's meant for. It's meant for these processes and tasks that you don't want to do. So if you want to run lead generation every morning 9 a.m., or if you want to run a repeating like invoice clearing flow, insurance claims, things like that, that is what it's like, runs fully remotely. And because we control the browser layer, there is more reliability that we can extract out of it, because when you're running as an extension or synchronously on Chrome, you're limited to what like the inputs that you can get while the user is using it and their browser. When we control the whole browser, we can extract anything that Chrome has access to. And that's, everything from the smallest level of like, is this clickable or not, to like high level, is this an image, what kind of image, etc.
But you prompt the user for auth and stuff like that, right? If there's some platform they need to sign in on, the browser will send you a notification saying, your headless browser will send you a notification saying, hey, log into this. Does that still happen?
We do that in like 2 or 3 ways. So you can have the human in the loop system where it prompts you and you can share access. We have designed this internal system where you can share auth credentials, and there's like a secure way of it. There's like some pockets of that it cannot do really well yet, which is like OAuth and some of the Google stuff, and
like an OTP system and stuff would be difficult.
So we handle OTPs. OTPs and MFAs are handled. And the way we do that is every bot, like I said, is like has an email, has a phone number. So the simplest way to get a bot onto doing a workflow for you is just add it as a collaborator in all your tools.
How long have you been building this?
March, April. So it's like 6 months, 7 months.
It's awfully well thought out for like 6 months.
You can designate how much control you can give. Is kind of cool, because someone sent me a tool recently asking me to share all the screenshots on my phone such that they become shareable. And I instantly didn't want to do it. As soon as I hit share, I was like, as much as I am excited to try this out, I do not want to share any credentials. I don't want to share any of my private data. That's why the auth question is interesting, because how are you going to bypass that? Because I don't want any AI agent to be able to log into anything from my...
No, I think Aryan will have less of the problem because they're using it for more B2B use cases. So it'll be something that it's company approved. It's probably company data. It's company auth or individuals inside a company auth.
Aryan, I have a question, right? Like, it is bound to happen at some point because you're entering such new territory, right? Which is headless agents who are working when you are not at the computer, you are living your life and agents are working. There's going to be some point that something breaks. There's going to be one agent that does something that someone disapproves of. What do you think that's likely going to be?
There's two things where we've seen how this fails. And like, if I go too much into the weeds, just tell me to like come out. But when you run any of these agents across, like, give it a simple task, like go to make my trip and book me a flight from Bombay to Bangalore on like X date. Where it can go wrong is if you run it on single page workflows, or if you patch the pages together beforehand, it'll be able to handle that decently well, because there's no ambiguity in figuring out what this maps to. Like because you can see exactly what's happening. All the action items are on the page. It's a field you have to fill up, a toggle that does something on the page. When it is, you can see a search button and you can see a navigate button. You can see an explore button. You don't know what that maps to, which is where it's likely to go wrong. So you can kind of extrapolate and think of it like single page constrained workflows were outperform these navigational kind of workflows. There are ways you can think of bypassing that, where like, imagine you kind of construct this graph of a website beforehand. And it's kind of like there's these sitemaps that are already
XML,
available in a bunch of websites. Yeah, it's like sitemaps that are already available. You can use that as an influence point where this leads to this, but it's still pretty abstract and broad. You want even inside the weeds, like this button links to this, to this, to this. And if you like, it's like a wild way to say this, but at some point, somebody's going to have to re-index the internet for bots to run. If you have to run, like just based on language model capabilities right now and looking at how like they're going to grow in the next 6 months, if you make this like massive index of just how different things connect together, and you chunk that out and give it to the bots, then you just made the whole flow more deterministic. The problem is that these are probabilistic and non-deterministic models, so they can spit out shit.
Did you say at some point someone will have to re-index the whole internet for bots to run?
Or people will have to design websites slightly differently. But I'll tell you, I disagree with you there, because I think I've been tracking some of the front-end testing frameworks, right? Especially the ones who are now claiming that, hey, we have AI in it. Generally, their mapping of which button to click, basically they're just looking at CSS, the HTML structure behind the scenes, right? What the classes are named, what the buttons are named. And then they're like, hey, this is likely the button to click if I want to go to the book a trip page, right? And they're fairly accurate. I assume from whatever I tried, it was kind of flawless. Even hyperwrite is kind of flawless, right? Where hyperwrite fails is if I tell it, scroll 5, columns down, then it measuring 5 columns is a little bit iffy. But I also feel that's a limitation more because they're sitting on top of GPT, and probably you guys will have the same issue. But as those underlying models evolve on reasoning, I think this should be a pretty easy task, unless there's like some really terrible like front end dev for a website and he's just named things really poorly and all his buttons are called button 1, button 2. And it's not just the ID or the class name of the button, right? Maybe even the button text says something random, like get started now or something like that. Maybe then it's like kind of weird, but I feel like eventually everyone will understand that you also want bots to book. So let's be bot friendly.
Yeah, I think being bot friendly makes sense, which means it's kind of like, how do you make your websites more accessible? And accessibility and ARIA labels have been a thing on the web for a long time. You'd be surprised by, like, I sort of think, so I had this bias when I was first kind of trying these agents. It was like, they seem to work pretty well, which is why we kind of got into this space not realizing how much they can fail. But when you run it across like thousands of workflows, you kind of realize that the web is, you cannot assume that the web is standard at all. Like a button might not really be a button. It's like 3 divs patched together, made with on click, and then it just goes there. So you like, if you're using HTML and like DOM elements in that, it's just impossible for you to solve for 100 on 100 cases, or even 90 on 100 cases, because people design all these funky things. More of them don't have ARIA labels. They'll have class names that are re-rendering, like Next and all of these frameworks. So it's just impossible that like you have a standardized version of the web to inference with, which is why the only plausible approach that I've seen work well, which is purely model based, is you do the whole thing multimodal, where you
just look at
use
it.
these models to, like localize it. That's how we use it. So we don't care what the class name is. We don't care if it changes. We look at visual input and kind of make sense of
how it looks is the only thing that matters.
Correct. And I think you cannot do that really well with just CSS styles yet, because even CSS styles can be like funky. And
you don't need to screw with the HTML at all, no? If you're looking at the page.
Yeah, if you run multimodal, it's all cool. So I think that's kind of the only reliable approach, and that's where we would kind of do our model efforts if we do it at some point. But I think besides that, like even all of these tools, agents that you mentioned, if you run them on, also the thing is, if you run them on larger flows that are more than 5, 6, 10 steps, and they have to use memory in the process, where capture data once, reuse it again, or like keep context of the whole thing, and you come back to the same tool again later on in the flow, you start seeing it's like it's a de-escalation from success rate looking like in the 80s or 70s, and then it comes down to like 5s and 10s, just because most people, when they try it, it's like one smart way to do it as a founder is just look at the app like Amazon Alexa top 10,000 sites and run from top to bottom, because most people are going to try it on the first 100 sites. And if you solve for that, you're like covering for a bunch of things. But if you want to solve it technically, there's no way to kind of do it on the web without, like, multimodal is kind of the only plausible way with like all the tests that we run. And we use like testing kits, includes like all these automation libraries like Puppeteer, Selenium, etc. That's kind of our conclusion after, and we've had so many like interactions on this. Like
it's crazy. Like I wouldn't have expected it. I wouldn't have expected people to be like, it's fine if the inference cost is slightly higher that I'm using multimodal, but screw HTML, CSS. I don't want to mess with HTML, CSS. It's just non-standard. Let's just look at it and decide. In a nutshell, you're saying, forget reading what's behind the page. Let's just look at it. Let's kind of use human eyes or digital eyes in a way, and let's take it from there. That's quite interesting.
Like I can give you one simple analogy for that. So even when you use HTML and other stuff, you are essentially kind of trying to do that, where like if you look at Natbot's code, it's like open source on Python. What he does is he's creating this pseudo HTML structure, which is trying to extract the non-standard things and just make a chunk that is with standard things. So it's just buttons, links, etc., etc. But increasingly the web becomes more unstandard, where like divs and like, if this is like weird things where LinkedIn and GitHub have their own tags, where it'll be GitHub dash button, it's not button, or like something weird like that. So it's, I think even when you're using HTML or like the approaches that agents use so far, you are kind of trying to condense what's visible on the web into this object that makes it as...
I think using multimodal has a secondary advantage, which is you can port this outside the browser as well at some point. Like say you want to make an agent play games, and let's say it was fast enough for you to make decisions split second. Like fine, put this into, I don't know, chess or something, like automatically click from here to here, because it's the same mechanism.
And there is like one other thing that I think on the model front, this might also be just me going tech nerdy on this, but there is this very cool paper that OpenAI wrote in 2016 called World of Bits that Karpathy and like Jim Fan and a bunch of others wrote. And that kind of tried, it created these Docker containers or just mini environments of the web of games and stuff. And that was pre-transformers. That was only RL. It was like trained on reward functions, and you had these bots that are trying to learn how to play games. They're like learning how to fill forms, etc. The that sort of makes sense because a lot of people think RL is the only way you get to real intelligence because it's
No, but Karpati has a long thread on this. He wrote it recently. I'm sure you're referencing that one, right? Where he's like, RL is like you're trying everything and you're like hoping it works. But then if you have like a sort of intermediate intelligence layer like GPT who's reasoning through, the thought process, then you have better success rate. So that's what I was saying. Like if you have the multimodal eyes in a game and you have something doing the middle level reasoning instead of just trying everything possible, like press all the buttons and, eventually figure out how to hit the end goal. So you are going to be directly responsible for a bunch of cheaters in Valorant.
Maybe we will definitely do some RL. I will not deny that. The thing I was saying about RL is it's like as a simple example, it's like RL gives you infinite context in an infinite world. When you're using GPT or kind of constrained models, it's finite context put in infinite words, which is why it fails. You have a limited prompt, or like your system prompt can only be so long, or your prompts can only be so long. But you're leaving it in a world where it can do anything. So it's just like the exercise of making a good agent is how do you make finite context work in infinite worlds. And like most people lead to RL. Maybe there's like new stuff that comes with multimodal, but yeah.
Interesting.
So when I start using it, I have you templatized the whole thing, or like there's two ways to be able to use this, right? One is like a car, which is okay. There are 8 or 10 levers that I can play with, and one is like a plane where you make it hyper customizable for me. There's 50 buttons that I can play with. How are you guys approaching this for now?
So this might be a boring answer, but the way because of the user group that we target, and because it's all these businesses, they don't even care about agents. That's step one. They don't know what agents are. They don't care about agents. So it's not. They don't want to run this for like a magical autonomous thing that like wows me and gives me a fun feeling. What they want to use this for is how does it save time and how does it like enhance capabilities. So we don't have a magical setup process, unlike like some of these similar other agents. I think all the agents are cool. I use them as a consumer, but for these businesses, if you just give like text descriptions or like go and do this and this, it doesn't meet the reliability benchmarks that they have for. And this is in like business context, we are in the RPA industry. This is what like some of these large RPA automation companies have been doing on the desktop on Windows for a while. So for us, it's more about like hitting reliability than how like magical the experience is. So when you put in like a flow, we have two ways to start. You can either put in an elaborate text description, and this is like a process doc or a workflow doc that you share with someone, like a real back office or someone else, step by step listed down. Do this, then you will do this, then capture data, store the data, then reuse it here. We kind of put that in. We compile that to a language, it's like a local DSL that we run on the browser, which is our way of interpreting what input you have given. And when you are setting up the workflow, we will ask you questions in the process to clarify ambiguous things. If you're just like search for shoes on Amazon, we will like the way we will understand it is go to the search bar, enter, and then like click on the search button or like use the keyboard press. So if there are ambiguous things that you've said, like book a flight and you don't mention the date, we don't do flights, but let's make an example. It'll ask you for clarification. Then it creates this elaborate understanding of what your flow is. Where it saves the business time is the alternative to this. Is people would write internal Puppeteer Selenium scripts, but they're going to script every button class, like Varun said, right? You can do stuff with class names. They will script every class name, every tag of every search bar button, like anything that they want to interact with. And that can take a week, that can take 3 months, that can take whatever. So what we save time with there is you give us text input, we'll ask you clarification questions. And instead of you having to script the whole flow, we will just make it so that once we have chunked it into steps, each step will run autonomously. We will do the inference for what to do in that step. And that step could be going to a website, could be clicking on one button. We will do that step autonomously using the web context, but we will not, like you don't have to manually tag every button and script it. That's one way to set up. We have this other version where we want to make it as intuitive as possible. So even text input doesn't make as much sense because people have to actually write the whole thing down. It's not fun. It's a boring activity when you have to go to your browser, look at what you want to do, and then like enter it into a text box. We are creating because we run everything on a remote browser and it's visible. We are making the remote browser interactable, and we will kind of make an easy way for you to basically sort of like screen record, but come on our platform and screen record. We'll provision a browser, kind of screen record your whole thing, and we will interpret what you've done directly from there. And then we'll ask you clarification questions if there are any.
That's way better, no?
That's a Loom. You're using Loom to command a browser to do stuff automatic.
That is way better. It's also way harder, but we will have to do it at some point.
It was very interesting. I have a question, okay? Like more like a business idea. Can you make a marketplace of people who want to sell their workflows? Like, let's say I have a very complicated workflow as a business, right? Maybe say my sales rep finds an email from some platform, let's say LinkedIn, of somebody they want to reach out to based on certain targeting. Then, the email's actually sent out. Then if there's no response for a few days, it follows up. So it's not pure RPA, because I think the follow-up you'll have to use the Gmail API to do that. But I feel like you can do a mix of the two. And if I'm able to create my workflow, throw it on your platform and charge people $20 for it, people might eventually realize that's a lot wiser to do than use some SaaS tool.
Yeah, we had this like small line in the TechCrunch article which we put out, which is like Zapier has all of these templates, and Zapier was kind of the pioneer of the API integrations economy. And unless the internet bans all agents, we are kind of entering an agents economy, and that is, it's surpassing the limitations that are there with APIs. You can obviously set up a lot of automations with APIs, but APIs don't give you all the data. They have rate limits, and sometimes platforms might not have APIs. So there's going to be an agent economy that is created and that's why making an automation platform made sense, where in the new agent economy, there's a new experience you can design.
That's a clever way to think about it. You're like an alternative to Zapier.
But like, think of it as, instead of restricted at API, open API specs and things like that, it's the browser is
everything.
In some sense, the browser is also the greatest API, because it's a human readable API, and it's been built over 20 years with so much reliability and trust. So we've definitely explored templates as a concept, because that is, some of these flows are very standard across companies.
Do you feel like many of these websites, sorry for cutting you off, I want you to finish your thought there as well. But do you feel like many of these websites are going to just be like, hey, these, like, the API rate limits for a reason? Let's say Make My Trip is just like, I'm going to get bombarded by agents, so I'm not going to let any agents come into the platform. But can they tell?
I'll give you how we think about it, which is the reason bots are a problem. And so step one is acknowledge that bots are they're also like AGI. This is inevitable. People have been creating bots before people started on doing anything on the internet. Scraping and bots have been around forever. The problem with websites is you want to differentiate between good bots and bad bots, which is why the Mozilla /robot.txt file, that those interfaces were designed, where you can, like, OpenAI open source their GPT scraper bot recently, and they gave out their fingerprints, which is basically like, if you're a website, you want us to scrape from you, allow us with that fingerprint. And if you don't want to scrape, like us to scrape, just disallow that fingerprint and we will not scrape you. So that's kind of the distinction. Bots are going to happen. The problem is, who are good bots, who are bad bots? Bad bots are who are going to use you for like reusing your content without giving you money. And they're coming in and like taking page views without you getting ad money for it. Because they are inevitable, I think this is like still a little bit far away. I would imagine like a year or two, we'll have more clarity on this. But there has to be some form of conclusion that comes between these platforms and agents and bots that are running on them, where like you have to have some way of declaring that you are a good bot and you're doing this for a real user. Maybe the way to prove that is you actually pay money, and you're like, I'm not using your API, I'm going to extract data out of this, but here's money that I would have otherwise spent on API calls that I will use to access your website. Or you have like some sort of mechanism there, because unless that happens, it's just kind of, websites are going to try to ban bots, and bots are going to try to bypass those detections. And that's kind of how we think of it, where at some point there has to be some conclusion that comes in there. And I don't think some of these, especially with the e-commerce platforms, if a bot is coming to you and adding cart items and actually making a purchase, that's adding to your top line. Like, it's GMV, it's revenue for you.
Why would they?
You don't mind bots that are making you money. You don't want bots that are taking your stuff and like putting it on Flipkart, like if Amazon is running.
Elon Musk will disagree with you.
I mean, I think Twitter bots is a different story.
No, but Twitter bots aren't making revenue, right? What are they doing? They're adding nothing to the platform. They're just adding junk. I was
having this discussion with someone, and he was like, this is why WorldCoin was created, where we'll have an internet of bots, and when a human wants to use it, they will scan their iris and kind of prove that I'm one level above, so you have high tier access. And it's too like weird to think of. I think it's possible, where there's like just more bots on the internet, and it still happens, but there are more bots just doing most things and humans going in when they want to.
That's interesting.
I wanted to book flights because did you know that 30% of customer support pings on a bunch of these travel websites are just human errors. Like most people who ping customer support urgently is instead of Mumbai to Delhi, I booked Delhi to Bombay. Like it's the most number one most common mistake, and I just can't wait for an agent to not make that mistake for me.
I think everyone gets an executive assistant, no?
Yeah, basically.
Like, I think that's the magic of the internet, that I think what a lot of rich people have or had has started. I mean, I'm talking about the digital stuff, the people, the talent they can hire, not the cars that they own or the houses that they have. But a lot of that is now getting commoditized. If you can now get an executive assistant at whatever, $5 a month, that's wonderful. And I think it's a world of abundance, even though it feels like a world where we're losing a lot of stuff. So what's your AGI timeline?
Oh, that is weird. So we had a session with Karpathy recently, and I was listening to some of these talks, and he was also talking about this when he came for the session. He was like, the version of AGI that we think of is maybe not going to be as kind of large of a sudden shift that people think it is. With GPT-4 and kind of these models being there, we already have the first leap of primitive traces that lead to that. So and a lot of people at OpenAI and like other companies say this, where like maybe GPT-4, maybe 5 with like great engineering and infrastructure built on top of it is going to be AGI for most people in like chunked like bases. So I think in that I have a short timeline. We'll get to these, like it's just accelerating faster than we can wrap our heads around. And
so like 2 years, 3 years? What's your optimistic and pessimistic timelines?
Lesser than 5 is like optimistic, where we will kind of start thinking of this as more generic intelligence. I don't know beyond that. I think it'll be once that happens, maybe we'll stop making predictions. We'll just be like, it'll figure it out itself. We don't need to worry about the timeline. It's just happening.
I mean, you're 19. How's the entire media blitzkrieg around raising money? Were they kind?
We were very happy with TechCrunch because they portrayed our story as it is. They were like very kind with that. The only hesitation I had originally there was they put in teens in the headline, and we were like, if they put in like we're young and nobody's going to take us seriously anymore. We're anyway selling to like these enterprises that are like buyers are older than us and they have concerns. But I think it's kind of like the reason we are excited to do this, and like that tech is the only place where you can do this, where people don't discriminate based on age, especially like in Bangalore, SF areas like this, where it's like a young founder taking on a big opportunity with the right team. You have way more compounding opportunity there, and you can also it's more exciting. So that was the only concern. Otherwise, they were kind. We just directly did it on TechCrunch, and then we put out our own blog post, which had context about why we're doing this and what the product is, etc. Everything else was a feed off and copy, and they referenced us a little bit. There was some miss like quotes and stuff with like Indian origin and things like that. But overall, it was fine. I think they called us Indian origin, which was like we tried to clarify it with them that we're Indians and we are not Americans, and we just say Indians.
Did they change the article after you gave the updated statement?
I think some of them did. Some we have to still follow up on. But overall, it was nice.
If they had an agent, they could have just read the email and made the change it themselves.
Yeah, the reason we announced was we wanted to like get in the door with some of these exciting customer conversations we've been having, and that went well. I think all of the second order media effects are just like our buyers and audience is very specifically. They're probably not even on social media. There's like maybe LinkedIn, Twitter a little bit, but otherwise we have to go the regular route. Maybe cold calling is more effective than media there. So it was good overall.
Now that you're heading into the business side of things with this product, I was talking to someone yesterday who said that, amongst a slightly older generation, they've probably heard of Ozempic, but they still haven't tried GPT-4 yet. There's a large section of this world that still hasn't tuned into all the stuff that AI is capable of. Are you noticing that as well with the customer cohort that you're going after, which is they still either haven't heard of, forget agents, but haven't heard of GPT-4 yet and or are skeptical of it?
There are two like patterns there. One is they definitely don't know the buzzwords, which is why we don't call ourselves like an agent or agent platform. Even our website was, we had to put in AI because there was some AI in it, but it's just AI workers. We had to kind of make it as straightforward as possible. We'll just call it smart bots if we have to. because they don't understand agents, they don't understand GPT, like how it works and like what multimodal is, etc., etc. They definitely know there's AI.
You can just call it digital employee.
Yeah, the reason we didn't call it digital employees because when you think of an employee, there's also insurance and like salaries and like things you have to think about. A worker or bot is just easy to think of as it's like a disposable resource that is like below humans. We want to kind of make it clear we're not even from a point of conveying the idea perspective. So yeah, everybody knows of AI. They are excited. We've spoken to some people who are like, we want to do something with AI. We just don't know what it is because the whole company is excited about it. We are figuring out what to do. And then we have to go and explain to them that this is like, sometimes they want to do things that are not possible. It's like, can you do this whole thing? And I will just like remove my people from doing this. And like, AI is exciting, but it's not do anything wonders and like randomly stuff happens. And sometimes they underestimate the capabilities. Right? They're like, this is just like you writing better code and things are working. So some of them, like everybody knows of AI, which is why they're excited. They're taking conversations. And that's the advantage with, I think there's like only a small incubation period where young companies can come in and break into these markets where people are open to having conversations. But like they don't know buzzwords. So we don't, we have to educate a lot of them. There's a lot of documentation that goes in, which is why I think like there should be more podcasts and more things, especially targeted towards like older age groups as well that kind of make them aware. Because that's just lost opportunity for everybody if they don't know stuff.
Dude, Varun, at 19 to have not only these many ideas, but to pack your bags and go to SF and be like, yo, just the guts of writing email to Sam and being like, yo, I'm thinking of just the action of having this much confidence to write that email. This is not something that happened in my generation, bro.
You know, it's ironic. But I kind of did the same thing. I remember at 19 when I started a recruitment tech company, right? It's not AI. We didn't have AI at that time. But I wrote an email to Sam. Sam was running Y Combinator at that time. And Sam sent me the most generic 2-line reply to that email. So my email, so I wanted him to invest, right? But I don't want to start off with that. So I was like, hey, I love you, what you've been doing and stuff. Can you tell me where the future of work is headed according to you? It's a weird question to ask him because clearly nobody knew he was going to run OpenAI at that time. Yeah. And, even he didn't know that the future of work is going to be completely automated or whatever. And his reply was so generic. He was just like, just focus on the company and like, that's the best way to...
He was using GPT 0.2 to reply.
To reply, right? That definitely seemed like an early version of GPT. But... And I know this because the reason I did this was because I was a big fan of Y Combinator in the early days, right? I still am. I think they're still doing some good work. And it's like the only thing that I didn't do was go to the Valley because I did a poor man's version of that. I went to Delhi. I was like, there's an incubator in Delhi. So I was like, I'm going to go join this incubator. And in the 8th semester, I luckily didn't have to attend college and do stuff in college because I was able to do it at the incubator. But I feel like the courage to go abroad to do this, the courage to kind of build agents, it's like you have a window where if done right, nobody will care about how old you are.
Yeah.
Right. And if done right, like the opportunity is massive.
Yeah. I think there was this Paul Graham essay, one of the recent ones, which was like the only way you can create value or like do something meaningful is if it's genuinely exciting you and energizing you, and you cannot fake it. Like if it dies out after 3 months, just it's not going to happen. If there's something that like keeps getting you in the weeds, which is why when we like started, there was like, this was at the same time when GPT-4 had come out and there were all these wrappers that are being built and they're fairly low hanging fruit. Like if you develop a decent enough product with a good experience, you can make money off of it. I think just from the composition of our team, it was like, and there's like all of these people who listen to people and like, you have to build a distribution first company and you have like first become a creator and influencer and do stuff. I think that makes sense. But just the kind we looked at ourselves and we're like, we can't be creators. We cannot, like, I can't do the stuff that needs to be done to do that well. So what is our advantage? Like we cannot build distribution first company. We are like young hackers. We can move fast. We can do customer support at 3 a.m. that a lot of companies cannot. So we have to build a product tech advantage and use that as a lever to get into everything else.
And also, if you raise a lot of money in the Valley, you can buy distribution. Like there's no reason to build it yourself. You can buy it.
Yeah. I think you can, and also it gets easier over time where like your product becomes the lever to unlock distribution, but you cannot kind of start with that as an edge. It's like I'm walking and I'm like I will sell to enterprise companies in like sales ops. A 40-year-old will make 5 calls and do more revenue than I can do in a year, and that's just.
You can hire the 40-year-old if you raise money. See, you're in a market. I'll tell you where the thesis of distribution first comes from, right? It comes in markets which are either saturated or there isn't fundraising capability or the profit pools are really low. You're working on a problem where there can be a bunch of funds that will put in $100 million over the next 4-5 years, and you can afford to make a ridiculous number of mistakes. Contrast that to, let's say, a D2C company sitting in India where they're selling maybe hair oil. It's a very saturated market and they need, like, no one's going to invest $100 million and say, hey, figure things out. So I feel like it's more a function and also the profit pools there. Like, it's now been enough time. People know, okay, if I sell 1 pack of hair oil, then I'm making whatever, 5 rupees profit multiplied by the TAM or whatever, right? In your case, it's like the TAM seems infinite. It is infinite, in my opinion, like close to infinite. Your fundraising capability, excitement, everything is super high. So you don't need to optimize for distribution. If you build good tech, the distribution comes. One thing we learned, right, because we built a few wrappers in the early days, is if you build a wrapper early enough and your tool is really good, everyone will cover it. Like, for some reason, some of our tools went viral in Spain where there's no way. If you ask me to do it again, I can't. It's random. And it's like all our Indian distribution is kind of pointless because Indian users didn't actually pay for it. But it went viral in Spain and Spanish users paid for it, it is so random, and a lot of that random stuff will happen to you because a lot of creators will realize this is an interesting tool, it works, it's useful, let me make a video about it because selfishly I get some views out of it, right? And if 3-4 big influencers do it, the next 20 will do it. So in your case, you don't need to buy distribution. They will not, you don't need to make distribution, but those influencers will not do the same for hair oil.
Yeah. We were, I think, I agree with like the broader thing where we just looked inside and we were like, if we have to do something big and large, let's pick a problem that's going to take 6 months to even get baked in. Like the first version is going to take 5-6 months to come out. But that's where like we can have some scope of advantage where it's hard enough where someone cannot like just walk in and be like, oh, this is how you do it. If we would have had distribution, we would probably go about it differently. But this is kind of, we just acknowledge as a team, this is what we can do best. And we'll use this to kind of unlock and open doors that we cannot do well.
Anyway, if you ever need access to distribution to Indian businesses, we're always here for you, Indian origin founders.
Last question, okay? This would be a fear I would have if I was building agents, which is, do you feel like OpenAI will compete with you? Like my biggest fear, like 24/7 would be like, holy shit, like Google owns Chrome. OpenAI, it seems like a very high value problem for them because I feel like that's where the money in AI will be made, right? Something automating a workflow. It seems like too high value an opportunity for them not to do.
First is, I think I'll just remove all of the, let's not rely on other sources to help us. So like, there's people who will say that maybe regulation will prevent them. Nothing is, forget all of that. It's just head to head. We are free markets competing. I think just incentives wise, there are two things that for all of these model companies. One is, I think the reason they're building the intelligence layer is that's where there is some sort of advantage and more to be built in, and all of the other layers eventually get commoditized. And the reason they will that becomes the core of what they're doing is because that's where all of AI starts. And that's like OpenAI built the models first, then is kind of building interfaces on top of it. And if you look at resource allocation, it's still mostly research and then some things come out. I definitely think more model companies will start talking to customers directly, serving them directly, because it's a good research feedback loop for them. But I think even like besides us, like OpenAI can disrupt almost any company in the world today if they decide to. They can disrupt all the language tutor, like Duolingo, a bunch of companies that are partners with them. They can disrupt the other model companies, cloud companies, all of that. I think in just scope of focus, if they want to keep performing as well as they are, it makes sense that you make these partners who do the deployments, do a little bit of deployments, but get all of the data, get all of the, refine the core, because that core is going to stick with you and you have a clear advantage there. I think second is, as more model companies do, the thing that I originally said was the infrastructure that we've built, and this is all given we don't have our own models at the scale that OpenAI has, because we can't do that. We don't have enough money. The aiding infrastructure in this process, the custom browser that we've designed, that we run our bots on, the whole remote kind of running process, the way we handle authentication, all these kind of aiding things, in the future, how we deal with like bots, all of that. I think that that infrastructure, the more and the faster we refine that with more customers, it just increasingly becomes more valuable. Any company in the world that either the model company or a company is building with the models will want to control the intelligence layer themselves. So we will stop doing the intelligence then. We will just use the infrastructure we've built. We've refined it with so much.
So you're saying the end goal is for you to get off the OpenAI drip?
We just want to be like the infrastructure that aids OpenAI, where they can use us, people building bots on them can use us. It's routed through us. So that they control the models, OpenAI helps with the models, they help with the input output, but to actually make the execution, the runtime environment, we are kind of the runtime for deploying.
The problem with this is depends on how much money you make. Like if you start making a lot of money and it becomes an like commercially attractive opportunity for OpenAI, they will disconnect. And my recommendation is, even though Sam's an investor, you should also plan like a fail safe. Like Lava and stuff are great in the sense you're already thinking fail safes. But I think it's like, I don't understand, like my own personal opinion, maybe I'm dumb or stupid about this, but I don't understand what's happening between Microsoft, OpenAI, Microsoft, Llama. It's like everyone's in bed with everyone and everyone's like kind of hedging who the winner is going to be because nobody knows. And the only people I feel that are doing it independently are like Google. Google's like, screw you, we have DeepMind, we'll figure it out. So it's a little bit iffy, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of collateral damage to small businesses. And somebody just like, I remember now GPT-4 has a page where you can just fine tune yourself. Like they have the one page. They didn't need to build it. It's literally not their focus area, but they have this one page where they're like, hey, you can fine tune yourself. And one of the guys at OpenAI tweeted about this, and somebody responded to him saying, hey, how can you kill so many companies? Like there was so many companies built with the intention of, hey, we will fine tune GPT-4 for you, right? And the guy was like, hey, if your motto is just a wrapper around GPT, then bad news for you.
The way I think about it is, you remember when they put out plugins and there was this whole 1 week of startup cry where every business is done, there's no SaaS company.
No, but plugins didn't have PMF. The thing is, if you prove, unfortunately, if you prove that you have very strong PMF, then it becomes attractive to them.
The analogy with plugins was more, I think they will do some of this, but I think just bandwidth, and that's like a classic startup thing where the bandwidth that they have
is better fed on GPT-5.
Yeah, they can better deploy that bandwidth on GPT-5 versus talking to customers and like looking at the small, like, are you compliant or not? And like, where's this data going and stuff like that. So I think like they're obviously big. They're going to control the space. They are leaders in the space. But I am generally, and this is also a little bit of irrationality because I'm kind of building this, but I think it's also in my best interest to just believe that there is value in kind of doing this, and eventually like the markets align and there is enough incentive for people to. And
in the short term, they're speeding up your time to market. Like you're absolutely taking advantage of them in the short term, right? So I think it's a win-win in the short term. Long term, I think there will be a divergence unless you guys get into a great partnership. Awesome. Aryan, do you have any questions for us? It's wild. It's a stupid thing to ask.
Yeah, he does. What the fuck are you guys doing with your life, bro?
No, I think I'm just curious because you've seen so many products and you're kind of reviewing this. How much of this, like, because you have so much exposure, how much of this is like actually implemented in your, like, what's the conversion rate of new product to like actual implementation in your life?
What do you mean by that?
Aryan is basically asking, Varun, you get hyped by every AI product. Are you using them in your daily life or no? Is what he's asking roughly, right, Aryan? Because Varun looks at everything and he's like, this is amazing. This is amazing. This is the best thing that's ever happened.
Yeah, I think I'll tell you what all I use, okay? So all my content is automated. I'm a lazy person. I think in the next couple of weeks, we are fine-tuning Mistral. Hopefully, I don't have to write scripts either, right? So that's a place where I actively use AI. People can see me using AI and it actually saves me time, effort, energy, whatever. We use AI for some projects. Like we're making an anime. It's just like, let's have fun, right? So we're using something called Animate Diff there. So in a way, we are primarily using AI for video. We also run an agency called Zeno, where we kind of build applied AI products for media companies. So some of these media companies, the questions could be as simple as, the problem statement could be as simple as, hey, build me a bot that writes like me. Right. And some of these are regional language newspapers. So they want us to write like them. Right. And some of it could be as wild as, hey, can you build infographics for me? Right. Can you build a tool where I can just say, hey, make an infographic with this? I just put in a table and you give me the infographic. Right. So a lot of that, in our opinion, is like applied AI. And so in a way, I'm probably the wrong person to ask about this, because every tool that comes out, I'm like, is there a commercial opportunity? Either building something on top of this or whatever. Like when we built Alpha CTR, it's just what? It's a fine-tuned image model for thumbnails. So it's like, we think in that direction. As a consumer, I'm excited about a lot of things. I'm a nerd, so I will be excited about a lot of things. But I think the thing that I use very often is the content replacement part. I do use GPT a lot as well. I use GPT as a sparring partner. I know Tanmay uses GPT like that as well.
Yeah, but Varun, your content replacement thing, like Varun is the only one who believes that people aren't seeing.
No, they see it. But I think from a share perspective, right? I look at the share ratio, and most people are talking about the topic. I know that a lot of people can tell it's AI, but also in the middle, I put out a real video of me, and everyone's like, this is AI generated. So now either I have intentionally created confusion, or people, I'm just looking at the share ratio, right? Like I get about 1,800 to 2,000 shares of video. People are actually like, you can't have 2,000 shares of video where people are like, look, this is AI generated. Some of them are like talking about, hey, whatever, the topic that I'm talking about in the video. So I feel like eventually people will tune out. This is an experiment. We'll know the results of in maybe a month. But it's also extrapolation, right? If it's this good today, in a year or 2 years, it's going to be great.
So for me, GPT is a sparring partner, like Varun said. And this is true for every creative marketing room that I've been in the last 6 months. I make sure I ask saying, are you guys using GPT? Widely used, very popular. In fact, in some places, it's a little more hush-hush because they don't want their bosses to know that, a 4-person team is doing a 10-person team's job. But apart from that, a lot of the other tools that I see, they feel like almost there, but not quite. But because, I've used Midjourney like a year ago and seen where it's gotten now. It's so clear that some of this is going to get so good that it's going to be obvious. Just yesterday, I was with a musician I was with a music producer who's a very popular ad director. And the tool that we use now, Varun, which is you can make a sound from your mouth and it turns it into an instrument. Guess what? Making songs on his own, sitting in Goa. His dream was to be a musician, and he was like, this is the first time I can create melody. I don't know how to play these instruments.
And he started doing it after the reel.
He started doing it after our reel. So I know that enough consumers are tinkering around. But is it something that, my computer or my, life is being automated? We're not there yet. And probably a little thankful that it's not there yet, that we're getting our time to adjust. And, there are not, GPT-4 to me is the, GPT-4 and Midjourney to me are the obvious Delta 4 products out there. A lot of the other rappers are not quite there. But here's hoping Induced is one of them, that it's a genuinely Delta 4 product that, that lets me book Bombay to Delhi flight.
Yeah, if the question is the hypothetical dream of, an RPA useful? Absolutely. Like we would use it everywhere. Like I'll tell you some simple workflows, right? On the content side, we definitely use it for just, getting good information. Like I would just leave a bot on Reddit. I'd just be like, go find the best stuff, right? And being able to give such generic, open-ended, statements to a bot is useful. I would definitely use it to like book flights. I would definitely use it to book medical tests. I would definitely use it. I mean, you'll have to build some trust with me for me to be able to put my card into it, swipe my card into it, or like just have my card on file. But yeah, we would use it. On the business side, whenever we make proposals for clients, I think being just a summary at the end of the day of whoever's working on the thing, it's a little bit dystopian, but like if there's an employee in the company and they're working on something, instead of them having to manually type like, hey, this is what I did today, just having a summary of, hey, here are the 5 tasks this person did would be useful. So yeah, I can see how it's.
I think I have like not the AGI timeline, but I have an agent timeline that I think will be like next 1 to 2 years, where you will like, I don't think you can get open-ended agents working as reliably that you will use it every day before that. We will attempt to do that.
What do you think Minion is doing? Do you know Minion?
Yeah, Alex was also AI grant batch 1. I am not sure. I have not seen the public demo, but I think they're building for consumers. I believe there is some mobile element to it now, like recent updates. But I'm not fully sure. And I think this is like this trajectory of a bunch of agent companies where they started with the ambitious goal of an open-ended agent that takes in 2 lines and does stuff for you. And they've kind of come to form factors where you can sort of constrain that and make it perform in like constrained environments well, and then eventually come out. That's also what we do, where the reason we work with businesses is because we can get a lot more input, we can work closely with them, and they don't care as much about like open-ended stuff where it's like structured but runs, gives me some added capabilities of like plugging in the model in interesting ways and like doing tasks that require reasoning that couldn't have been done with rule set based software. So I think everybody's in that boat right now. I'm very excited about all of them, because I think over the next year or so, as new models come out and then as they kind of learn, it's a worth pursuing engineering problem. And I don't think there is like the gap between one person figuring it out, either with a model or an engineering breakthrough, and then it being available and the others catching up, is going to be, it'll not be as significant. It'll be like a couple months maybe.
So all of you have to keep competing to get better every month. I mean, that's what's driving everything forward, right? Like the only reason HeyGen really pushed audio videos, like they know the like 50 people neck to neck. So I feel like I've never seen a field in a very long time that's where people are so motivated. There's such a big land grab. And I think that's pushing all the progress forward, because humans naturally will just be like,
it makes sense from a market point of view. Also, it's an infinite market. Everybody's going to have fun, survive. So it's a good race to be in. So 1 to 2 years, I think that's when you will integrate an agent in your day-to-day life. Until then, it'll be a little more problematic to get started. Not as magical, but we're getting there.
Is Silicon Valley thinking jobs? Like, are they thinking about the second order impacts of what they're doing? Or is it like a little bit?
Is it like, it's build first, figure later?
There is definitely a little bit of let's build, because I think a lot of people have intrinsically just internalized that jobs will be figured out, and there's never, like, a lot of people deeply, and I'm like, all of our backers, we are like, I look up to all of them. Like, it's like a privilege, and I'm super grateful to work with them, and because the kind of thinking that we learn from them, we've also sort of internalized now that just past tech cycles have demonstrated that it's not going to be as big of a shift, at least, especially not as big in the bad ways as it's going to help in the good ways. So there like some people who are thinking that way. There's like obviously groups that bring that into every conversation, where it's like, do you think like this is unethical, or do you think this is going to be tricky once we roll it out? And I think, which is why like a lot of these model companies have bigger policy teams increasingly, where they're like, OpenAI had to take down browsing and they've put it back because there was like stuff with content. There's like all of these elements that are coming in with just how the internet and the world embraces this stuff. So the Valley is not, I think this is like a slightly, all of the stories about SF are in that sense very true, where this is a very special group. People here will, like, if they're afraid of something, they'll try and go after it to kind of solve for it, instead of just making other people afraid, or like preventing them from doing it, because there's just too much force going in towards building stuff. You can't stop that. That's sort of what makes this place special. Yeah, I think so. They're not as much as you think. They're not as worried about jobs. They're careful. Everybody knows it's not going to be as easy as some of these previous tech waves. Every move you make, even as a small company, you have to be careful, because you might just do something that has never been done on the internet before, and that's like a violation, or somebody doesn't approve of it. So there's thoughtful leadership, and which is why like Sam, like all of these other like model leaders of the large companies, they're doing a good job, where they're setting the track right. Like, you can't go rogue. And I sort of trust them as a builder in the space to kind of lead.
Awesome. Congrats on being this mature at 19. Wish I was like this. Aryan, dude, all the best to you and Ayush. Hope you guys have a memorable experience in SF, and check out Induced. It's not, you guys can't check it out actually. It's invite only right now. But hey, whenever it's out, hope you guys check it out, and thanks Aryan for joining us.